the performance of smoke or heat detectors. Basically, what we're after looking into is a hypothesis that determines if you have a fire in a room of origin, such as a bedroom that we're going to be testing today, for example. The current standards require the detectors to be located in an adjacent hallway or means of egress. And what we're going to be looking at is the minimum standard requirement. Is it adequate if there is a fire in the bedroom and the door, for example, is closed or in an open position? Is the room become untenable, or does the room become untenable before the detector activates in the hallway or the means of egress?
And how long have you been doing it?
We started on this research project last summer, and we started in a downstairs living room type setting. And we went through a scenario of test where we had influence of air conditioner in an on and off position, ceiling fans in an on and off position. We were looking at also the position of the door to the room of origin. And that door becomes essentially a barrier to migration of smoke from the room of origin.
Wait a minute.
Whatever it is, there's something coming through. Well, it's not besides the beep. There's something. Can we shut off that computer?
Yes, we're currently testing the performance of fire detectors in a residential setting. For example, we have some concern that if a fire occurs in a room, for example, where you're sleeping, and the current minimum requirements dictate that the detector is located in a adjacent means of egress, such as a hallway, and if there is a door closed into the room of origin and you're sleeping, we're concerned that the detector will not activate in time and the room will become untenable and you'll not be able to escape. And this is a cause, we feel, for many of the fire deaths in the residential setting.
So how long have you been at it?
This current process of research has been going on for about a year.
Describe your method. What is it that you do?
Okay, the first scenario test that we've been going through involves a living room setting whereby we used as a constant the same flame source. We had a overstuffed chair. We had lamp, coffee table, magazines, drapery, carpet, a typical living room setting. And we tried two different types of fire source, such as a smoldering type fire ignition, and then we had a flame ignition source. And we had the variables in this particular series of tests involved the air conditioner system in an on and off position, a ceiling fan in the room of origin in an on and off position, and the door between the room of origin and the hallway in an open and closed position. And we would run through a whole series of tests with all the combinations to determine that if, for example, the door is in a closed position and there was a fire in the room, by the time the detector in the hallway activates, is the room tenable or untenable at that point? And that's what we're trying to determine.
Well, is it?
And in most cases, we're finding that when the door is in an open position, you do have time for escape or to get out of the room. If the door is in a closed position, that is the most has the most impact on that behavior of the detector located in the hallway.
I don't understand.
And based
Wait a
on
minute, wait a minute. You were doing great, so I didn't understand it had the most impact on the what was it? Okay. So tell me again. So what have you found?
Okay. When we had a fire, say the room of origin, and if the door was in a closed position, we found that you had a very narrow threshold of time to escape that room before the detector would activate, for example, in the hallway. And because
So are you saying that by the time the detector goes off, it's often too late?
it is, you're on a very narrow threshold because in some cases, such as a flaming type ignition fire scenario, you had somewhere around 45 seconds, plus or minus, to get out of the room. If you have a situation like a smoldering situation, then you're looking at maybe a 3 to 4 minute type time frame in which to escape. And this is the time when the detector activates and the time that the room essentially becomes untenable then.
Well, let's see if you can give me some, times from memory of all of these events, though. fire begins, when it's a flaming fire, and the door is closed, at what point does the smoke detector go off? And at what point do you have to be out of the room? How long is the fire to?
Okay, we have a whole combination of detectors. We're using and looking at smoke detectors, heat detectors, and sprinkler systems. And so we're in our test process, we're looking at all of the fire detectors available on the market today. And what we're finding is that in the room, we have very quick reaction, obviously, to the smoke detector as you begin to generate the smoke, but then very shortly thereafter, the heat detectors are sensing the heat from the flames, and they likewise activate. In the meantime, out in the hallway, for example, if the door is in a closed position, the smoke has to migrate under the door and then activate the detector in the hallway. And this involves time. And in this case, where you have a fire, time is very precious. And we're concerned that this is not providing sufficient time for a person to escape the room, particularly when you have a fire in that particular room.
When you're experimenting, what are you measuring in each of these rooms, and why are you measuring each one?
Okay, our research is measuring the oxygen. It's measured in the room and also in the means of egress. It's measuring the carbon monoxide in the room and also the means of egress. We're measuring temperatures. We're measuring temperatures at the walking height, at the ceiling, and also at the crawling height. We're in both rooms, incidentally. We're measuring smoke obscuration, which is the density of the smoke. And we're also measuring the time of operation of all of the detectors and in all of the different locations.
So what are you saying if I'm sort of a responsible human being and I know I'm supposed to have smoke detectors and I'm following the NFPA's rules, yes, and I've got them placed just so, and I'm even responsible enough to check them to make sure they work. Yes. What are you saying to me? That isn't enough?
Yes, that's correct. The NFPA minimum standards, and I might point out they are minimum standards, dictate that basically you have one detector in the hallway adjacent to the sleeping quarters. And what we're determining is that that is not adequate, particularly if you have the sleep with the door in a closed position, because the door again becomes a barrier to the migration of smoke out to the detector. And obviously that time is so critical and important to your being able to get out alive.
So what is key here then? You're saying it isn't enough. If it's not enough to have working smoke detectors in the places suggested by the National Fire Protection, what is key here?
Our preliminary findings and my personal opinion on this at this moment is that we're going to be recommending in the future additional detectors be placed, and we'll be addressing the issue of how to place them and where to place them. But basically, they should be in each room. And on a preliminary basis, we're thinking in terms of in the bedrooms, in the living room, for example, or any den, you would want to have the smoke detectors. In certain areas such as a kitchen, mechanical room, garage, storage rooms where it could get dusty, for example, you would want then a heat detector, because right now we're finding that the false alarms is a real problem where you have smoke detectors placed in the wrong locations.
Yeah, certainly knowing you have one in the kitchen.
That's correct.
Let's back up a little and give me some sense of what are some typical home fire scenarios? How does your research address them?
Okay, some other research that we've been involved in is looking into the kitchen fires, because that is a source of most of the fires that occur in the United States. And we have run through a series of grease fires, in fact. And to answer your question, it would be the kitchen or the grease fire is the largest source of fire right now.
What are some of the other typical scenarios?
Okay, we also looked at the bedroom, which we'll be doing testing on right now.
Well, I mean, if you could, pardon me for interrupting you, if you could list the typical kinds of fires that take place in homes, the typical kinds of fires are, that would help.
Right. Okay, they would be the kitchen, obviously mechanical.
Could you do your whole thing?
Okay.
Typical kinds of house fires.
Okay, the typical kinds of house fires would be the kitchen, because because of the cooking sources. It would be another would be the mechanical rooms because of the heating, electrical that takes place, and often the water heaters, for example. They could be the bedrooms where you would have a possible smoldering or electrical type of a fire or accidental ignition of a trash can, for example. And likewise, it could be a living room setting where, again, you could have an accidental ignition or a smoldering fire, such as a cigarette in the fold of an easy chair.
What's most dangerous about a fire?
The most dangerous element of a fire would be the toxic fire gases. And this is based off of the many synthetic materials we use in construction and in furnishing today.
What do you mean?
For example, all of your synthetic fabrics that are used in your cushions, your chairs, your pillows, carpet, wall coverings. So your light fixture, lenses, and so forth. If you look around in construction today, and also the furnishings, there are many, many synthetics that we're using. And those synthetics produce a number of toxic fire gases, such as hydrogen cyanide, benzene, hydrochloric acid fumes. So they're very toxic.
In your opinion, what's wrong with the way things are now? I mean, aren't smoke detectors, fire detectors living up to their potential?
I think in many cases, of course, we've found some false alarming situations in the test. And one of the additional tests that we are involved in currently is evaluating the influence of time and age on the detector. For example, in the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission is very interested in some of the research at this point addressing the issue of how does time influence the reaction and the behavior of the detector. For example, if we'll be looking at the 5-year, 10-year, and 15-year-old detectors, are they as responsive after 15 years as they were when they were new? Or do they influence, well, how is time influencing the reaction of the detector?
And what are you finding there?
We have just begun to collect, and we have designed and constructed the smoke chamber for that testing, and so that will be starting in the very near future. We've already begun the process, but we have not done any actual testing at this moment.
But aren't smoke detectors saving lives?
Yes, smoke detectors do save lives, but in many cases that we feel that they could save additional lives because we're still losing a lot of people each year in residential settings.
What are the numbers they use to back up that?
What's interesting is for many, many years, we're still fluctuating somewhere in the same level of 4,000 to 5,000 people each year. Now, some years it does drop down below 4,000, but it still will maintain somewhere in that same area.
I need you to do that again, and it's only because of my ear hears how I'm going to cut this, you know, and you gave me a number, but you didn't relate it to what it means.
Okay.
You know.
Sorry.
So if what are the numbers you use to back it up? You need to say 4,000 to 5,000 people still die each year. Yeah. Okay. So what numbers do you use to back that up?
Okay. Historically, the United States has experienced somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 people die from fire-related deaths.
And that hasn't changed?
And that has not changed drastically, even though in the recent years, a high percentage of the homes in America do have a smoke detector. And those smoke detectors are installed in accordance to NFPA minimum standards. And so we begin to question, that's basically where our research came to fruition, was that we are questioning, is that adequate?
And what have you found?
And preliminary results is indicating that the minimum standard is not adequate. That we need to have detectors placed in each room, particularly if it is capable of closing off those rooms with a door. Because the door does serve as a barrier to migration of smoke that has to get to the detector to be able to operate.
So in layman's terms, what's wrong with the NFPA standard?
Basically, we need more detectors. We need detectors located in each room. For example, in each bedroom, we should have a detector. And we should also have detectors in the kitchen. Well, the smoke detector does not lend itself for placement in the kitchen because of false alarming. Therefore, it should be a heat detector placed in each kitchen, for example, and likewise in the mechanical rooms, because that is a source of ignition also.
What's the difference between a smoke and a heat detector?
A heat detector is activated again by buildup of heat, and it has a fusible link that is calibrated to fuse or melt at a certain temperature. A smoke detector, there's two different types, ionization and photoelectric.
Don't get into that on that.
Okay. There are two types, I can just name them.
Just tell me what is the difference between
Okay.
a smoke detector and a heat detector.
A smoke detector will detect byproducts of combustion, the smoke,
And that's what triggers.
and that's what triggers it off, yes.
Yes, tell me that. Okay,
We'll
so,
put it that way.
so how does a smoke detector work?
A smoke detector will react to byproducts of combustion by detecting the smoke, and that in turn activates the detector.
Remember, I was telling you that we are going to sort of do a stand-up that says that after we've introduced some fire codes, we're going to do a stand-up that says, you know, most of us protect ourselves from the threat of fire at home by using these and by placing them where we've been always told to place them, and if we're very responsible, we make sure they work. But your research is suggesting that that's not enough. If that's not enough, what's key? Is it the number? What's key now?
There are several factors I feel that...
I don't want several factors. What are you doing? You said just one line. You said
One
the
line.
outside.
Okay.
You said it's the number and the placement
location.
of these that is key.
The key to proper protection is the location and the numbers of detectors.
I love you. Thank you. Okay.
Get that on tape. Oh, yeah. All of it.
Okay. Now, we had some talks with the NFPA, and they're going to get us any of the next week, so I'll wait for the plan. Is there a truck? Is the truck?
Wow, it's about ready to take off?
It's going on.
Taking off. Okay. I mean, the NFPA is saying that your argument really isn't anything new. What makes your research different?
The argument is not new, but what's interesting is we still have the minimum standards for quite a few years, and they have not been changed, even though we all feel basically that... Let me restart over.
Okay. Okay. What makes your research new? What about your research new?
This research has been accomplished in similar...
All right, let's
Oh, sorry, let me
be
back
more
up.
conversational,
Yes.
you know, just as
Okay.
if you were telling me for the first time. I mean, they're saying that your hypothesis is really not at all new. So, what, if anything, is different about what you're doing?
There has been similar research conducted in the past, but again, we're still not placing the detectors and the sufficient number of detectors in a residential setting. And what we're basically looking at is attempting to prove or show that additional detectors should be located in the home, and we're also determining the type of detectors that should be placed in the home to properly protect the people.
Now, some of your funding, of course, is coming from the smoke detector industry. I mean, aren't they just kind of hoping that you'll help them sell more smoke detectors?
That might be true from their perspective, but this is also being funded by an educational arm or foundation of the MasterGuard Corporation, and they do have as a part of their how can I say this? Start that over again, I mean.
Well, I mean, aren't you just, I mean, if they're paying you, the quid pro quo
Yeah.
question always is. Well, of course, they're
There are
hoping
benefits.
that you'll
Sure.
come up with some research that proves we need to find more smoke detectors.
Right.
So how do you answer that?
Okay. The current research is being funded by the Education Foundation of the MasterGuard Corporation,
They
And-
make smoke detectors.
and they do sell smoke detectors. And obviously, yes, they would benefit from that, but also they are interested in, or at least they've expressed the interest in, the fact that this would provide a more holistic protection for the home, of the residents. And essentially, they have provided us with the opportunity to look into this particular question and do it in a scientific format to determine is this true or not. And that's what we're doing now.
But if we should all follow your recommendations, of course, we'd all have to find more detectors. And that's going to be pretty hard for people on a budget. Do you really think that that's going to be, that there's going to be a plus cost-benefit equation?
I would have to respond, what is a life worth? Yes, it is very important that additional funding should be spent. And again, proper protection does require additional detectors. It is, I think, a false sense of security to put up one detector and expect that one detector to protect your whole house. That just does not work.
But they don't recommend one, well, unless you have one floor, a very small house, one detector's never recommended.
That is the current minimum standard in the NFPA requirement, 74 requirement list.
Well, then maybe you better explain that standard to me again. Tell me about what in layman's terms is that standard?
Okay, the minimum standard essentially says that a detector should be placed in the hallway adjacent to the sleeping quarters. And so that is the one detector, yes.
I thought the standard also said you should have one on every level of your house.
That's for a multi-story house, yes. For one floor house, it would be in the hallway
That's what we need
adjacent to
to
the
say
bedroom.
then.
Okay.
Okay. Because a lot of people out there live in two-story houses.
Okay, I'll elaborate.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if he's just getting his terminology wrong or if it's important that sleeping quarters, or do we want to say sleeping area, because is it
What
not?
about bedrooms?
Is it, well,
What is this
no, what I'm saying,
sleeping
no,
area?
what I'm saying is, I think it may be singular, not plural. I think it may be outside each sleeping area. Is it not? I don't know.
You would just say
I got it right here, I'll read it out loud then.
Outside each bedroom, instead of bedrooms in
Shall
general.
be installed outside of each separate sleeping area in the immediate vicinity of the bedrooms, and on each additional story of the family living unit, including basement and excluding crawl spaces and unfinished attics. I do not want you to give that to me.
Please.
I want you in plain English just to tell me.
in a hallway adjacent to the bedrooms.
Yeah, okay, so
Is that okay?
what does the minimum standard require today in, well, I mean, I think you have to, in the answer, concede that some people don't live on one floor.
The current NFPA 74 minimum standard requires a detector be located in the hallway adjacent to the bedroom area. And for a two-story, likewise, at the top of the stairwell next to the sleeping area or the bedroom areas.
Well, that's
So it's one detector on every floor, is that
When
Let's
you said,
one
well,
on
if
it.
you
You
said
want me to say one
on
on-
a two-story, where does the second one go then?
Okay,
I mean, isn't it
at
at
the
the,
top of the stairwell.
no, but at the bottom too, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes.
Don't you put one on each level?
Yes.
Wait a minute now.
But see, I already covered the first
Yeah,
floor.
but pause a second.
You mean
I'm
say,
just trying to think, if you have a two-story house, you put one at the top of your basement stairs.
okay.
That's right, and then you put one at the
Yes.
top of
See,
your...
that was in the hallway downstairs next to the bedrooms, and then at the top of the stairwell would be on the second floor.
Next to the bedrooms in
Yes.
most houses.
Yes.
You don't have one on your first floor at all?
Yes.
If you have a
yes.
basement?
No, it's in the hallway on the first floor.
Okay,
See.
so the top of the basement stairs, the hallway, the first
And
floor...
then the stairwell, top of the stairwell would be the second
Well,
floor.
then I think either in the answer we have to say that the minimum standard says if you live in a typical two-story dwelling with a basement, you have to have. Or if you can say two-story dwelling with no basement, I don't care, but just let's name what kind of a house we've described.
Okay,
Can we try to-
sure. You'll start with the one-story house first, or two-story?
I don't care which one you do, as long as you,
Okay.
but I think we,
Okay, I'll say you have to have a detector on each floor.
yeah, and you don't have to go NFPA 74,
Okay.
you know, the current
Okay.
minimum standard.
Okay.
Okay, so what is, in plain English, what does the current standard require?
The current standard requires a detector, a fire detector, be located on each floor of the dwelling. And it would be located in the hallway outside of the sleeping area or the bedroom area.
Fine. Okay, now, What's wrong with that, in your opinion?
Again, if you sleep with the door in a closed position, and if there is a fire in that bedroom, by the time the smoke moves under the door and activates the detector in the hallway or in the stairwell, the room is at the point of becoming untenable or difficult to sustain life.
What would you do with your results? First, when will they be finished?
We will be completing within the next month and a half all of the tests here on the bedroom setting, and we are now in the process of compiling all the data. We will be developing it into a report. That report, or parts of it, will be submitted for publication in different referee journals, and we'll be making this information also available to the committees that will be reviewing the current minimum requirement and standards.
What's involved in getting an NFPA standard changed?
Just like all building codes, the standards are an evolution type process whereby it goes through a series of hearings by committee, and you'll have input from industry, from the people, the general public, the user, for example, and from that, decisions will be made as to the minimum standards.
Any idea how long that might take?
In some cases, it will take a year or a year and a half.
So what do you want to say to people out there? What do you think they should do in the meantime? If it were your house, what do you do?
The requirements that I would like to recommend for everyone immediately is to put a detector, a smoke detector, in each of the bedrooms, in the living room, put a heat detector in the kitchen, mechanical room, and possibly in the garage and storage rooms. Again, where you might have dust that would interfere or make the detector false alarm, for example, you should put a heat detector. One of the real problems, in my opinion, is that a detector, a smoke detector, placed incorrectly will false alarm. For example, if you're burn the bacon or burn your toast, you have false alarms, and what do? You pull the battery out, right? And what happens if you forget to put the battery back in? And then you have a fire, and we're finding that in many, many cases, the detectors are installed, but they're disarmed. And consequently, they cannot do the job unless they have that battery in them.
Yeah, why do you think we continue to lose so many people in house fires? What are some of the theories that you now apply based on your research?
Again, I think it's not having adequate protection in the form of detectors, and because, again, like I just mentioned, the false alarming, you tend to disarm them, and so consequently they cannot do their job. But it's basically the numbers. We need additional detectors, and we need the proper types of detectors.
Yeah, there hasn't seemed to have been a great deal of talk about heat detectors in all the years that I've been on the street. I must say, I knew they existed. But nobody has ever, before that I'm aware of, made this kind of a specific recommendation that you should put heat detectors in the kitchen and things like that. What do we need to do to get the word out? Is this an education? What?
It's a part of education campaign, and also I think the people that will dictate or develop the code requirements can influence that also. But heat detectors have been around for many, many years, and they're very reliable. We have very little problem with false alarming of a heat detector. And so reliability, when you're dealing with a human life, reliability is very, very important, obviously.
So when I'm building a new house now or something, or moving into a new house, what should I do?
I would recommend that you have detectors placed in each of your rooms, and those detectors would be in the form of smoke detectors in the bedrooms, in the living room, the den, and of course, if the den is adjacent to or next to a kitchen, you're going to have false alarm problems, so you should be going to a heat detector in that particular case. In the kitchen, mechanical rooms, garage, storerooms, the heat detectors serve the purpose best. Because in most cases, for example, in the kitchen, you're going to have a flaming fire which is producing the heat that will be detected by the heat detector and likewise activated.
But won't go off and drive you crazy.
But it won't false alarm as readily. No, that's correct.
Okay. Now, these are some of the things that might come from your research, but might not, so I save them for last. So I want if you know this, you know this. If you don't, you don't. Can you give me any sense of how long it takes for a bedroom fire to become dangerous?
A bedroom fire can become dangerous very, very quickly because that's a difficult question. It depends on what is involved in the combustion process. For example, if you have synthetics, synthetics are producing a toxic fire gases, many combinations of fire gases, and those become very deadly very quick.
And is it any different in a living room fire, or is the same true?
Unfortunately, many of the same fabric, coverings, and materials are utilized in the bedroom and in the living rooms. And likewise, they're producing a toxic fire gas that will be very deadly. And so, time-wise, you asked a while ago, we're finding in our research that our test for a flaming type test will last about 3 to 3.5 minutes. And at that point, we have all the data we need collected. And also, the room has become untenable. As a matter of fact, we're looking at about 1.5 to 2 minutes in some cases that the room becomes untenable. And again, that term untenable is a vague term depending on the age, for example.
Sorry, lost the tape.
Oh, and then, how's that depend on the age? And
Because, for example, I had a detector that was wired into the electrical outlet. She plugged in an air freshener from Sears. After 6 months, the air freshener shorted, caught on fire. When it shorted, it kicked the breaker, obviously, and that shut her detector off, and she was overcome by smoke and died. So,
That's another story.
you need the battery backup systems always.
No, but I literally, when I cook, I have to, because it's a tiny little house,
Yeah.
I have to go to the circuit breaker box, turn off that smoke detector for the kitchen. Luckily, it's also the bathroom light, so you do remember to turn it back on, you know. But it is such a pain.
The one in my hallway on the first floor, that's the path the
Goes
smoke
off
takes
all
out of
the
the
time.
kitchen.
That's
Yeah.
right. Exactly.
You said it, that's
Well,
it's
see-
always, I come home every day and the door is hanging open and the battery is slid out.
So you have an air conditioner, right?
Yeah.
And the return air is in the hallway, and so it's actually drawing.
Oh, we don't have air conditioning where we live.
And you're still,
I don't have any air conditioning in my house.
that's
Just something that would make somebody have a full sense of being safe. You said the door closed
Yes.
won't trigger the. Now, with the
I think
average
other
person,
people have been told
Yeah.
the door
Yeah,
is
what's
a good
interesting
thing.
is in the elementary schools, a part of the.
Well, wait a minute, don't see it now.
No,
what I'm saying,
here we go.
okay, these are my question.
Okay, go ahead, what are you gonna say? What are you gonna say?
A part of the fire prevention programs for young people in the school system have actually advocated that they sleep with the bedroom door in a closed position. And what we're finding is that when you sleep with the door closed and there's a fire in that room, you stand a very good chance of not being able to survive that fire before it becomes before the room becomes untenable. I'm going to say that last part.
Well, I think what you really need to say too is, unless there's, you're not gonna have enough time unless there's a smoke detector right in the room with you.
That's correct.
Well, I mean, that's sort of plain English.
Yes.
Because if you're waiting for the ones in the hallway to go off,
Yes.
you might not make it.
And if you're sleeping,
Well, let's say that again.
Okay.
What are you saying goes on in terms of fire protection? Fire prevention education?
okay, in the school setting for fire prevention training, they're advocating, I shouldn't say they, should I?
Oh gosh, now I'm gonna make it, I don't wanna make it that crazy.
No.
Go ahead, just,
Okay. In the
in schools, a lot of kids are told.
Yeah. And as a part of the fire prevention program and training in the school system, the children are told to sleep with the bedroom door closed. And if they do sleep with the door closed, and there is a fire in that room, the bedroom, by the time the smoke activates the detector in the hallway, the room is near the point of being untenable. And so again, that is the benefit of having a detector in the room. It gives you that additional time to escape the room and the fire before it can overcome you.
One other thing though that I thought was interesting You know, the National Fire Protection Association's campaign for fire prevention is centering around the fact that people disarm their smoke detectors, don't check them, and they're not functioning. But they even make the point in their press release that the smoke of a fire will not necessarily awaken you, and that toxic smoke will actually cause you to sleep more deeply.
That is correct. Because again, depending on if the toxic smoke, what type of toxic smoke, but again, it takes very few parts per million to cause you to lose consciousness. And so consequently, one of the real problems, and you hit upon it, was the fact that the detectors are being disarmed. And you have to ask the question, why are they being disarmed? And I think that you would find the answer would be they're in the wrong location or it's the wrong type of detector. And that is the reason they're being disarmed.
Because they're causing false alarms.
They're causing false alarms, that is irritating, and so you shut it off. If you have the right type of detector installed and in the proper location, you should have less problem with false alarms.
But doesn't that make you wonder, though, why the National Fire Protection Association can say that, can admit that toxic smoke will make you sleep more deeply, and not recommend a smoke detector in the room?
That'd be an interesting question to ask them, wouldn't it?
Just was gonna give you your shot.
Okay.
We will, yeah.